2017, finance was not formally advised of these properties until November 1st, 2017. Not hearing back from Treasury, the Controller's Office worked with the PA Unclaimed Property Department to identify the city's unclaimed property. The results are filed as followed: approximately 99 claims for a little bit over $156,000. We note that some of these unclaimed properties go back to 1990. The Controller's Office submitted claims to the state for funds. We recommend the administration should check this website to ensure the city has all the monies owed to them. The administration responds that they were unaware that we'd submitted claims for the city of Allentown. The administration in their unclaimed property annual process has filed 29 claims representing 72 properties. The Controller's Office further notes, as identified above, the Controller's Office identified property as far back as 1990. So perhaps the administration should consider revising their annual review process. These funds are owed to the police pension fund, the fire fund, O&E fund. There's some money to the general fund and also some money to water and sewer. The process takes several months, and I'm sure that either Mr. Hartzell or I will report on this when these monies come back to the city. I also have 3 bank reconciliations to report on very briefly. They would be for the months of September, October, and November 2017. We're making pretty good progress on these because we need to get the year done in anticipation of the work beginning on the CAFR. So we're doing well there. In September, we reviewed number of bank reconciliations. Prepared was 24, the total amount was $46 million. The finding for that month was a deposit of $23,911.39 remained outstanding in a bank reconciliation since August 21st, 2017. We recommend the deposit should be posted to the cash subs on a timely basis. The administration agrees, and we'll research and adjust accordingly. For the month of October 2017, 24 bank reconciliations for $31 million. The finding there was we identified one pension check for $725. It was voided on the cash sub and Eden, but not on the ARP, and the ARP is the bank listing of voided checks. Once again, we recommend to provide a proper bank audit trail. Void should be communicated to the bank on a timely basis. The administration has researched this and updated the bank ARP. And finally, for the month of November 2017, there were 24 bank recs for a total of $32 million. And the finding there was, once again, some checks not voided on the ARP. 55 checks totaling $626,000 were voided on accounts payable, cash sub, and Eden, but not on the ARP. 17 checks totaling $26,000 voted on the payroll, cash sub, and Eden, but not on the ARP. And 6 checks totaling $2,759 voted on the pension, cash sub, and Eden, but not on the ARP. This issue is ongoing, and once again, we recommend to provide a proper bank audit trail. Void should be posted on the bank's ARP on a timely basis, and the administration agrees and is working to currently put a process in place to correct that. And I want you to know that Mr. President, I did those 3 in about 1/10 of the time that it would normally take to do a little bit more in depth. But if you really want all the details, that are available on the Controller's website.
Thank you. I will check that as soon as I get home tonight. Okay. On the agenda, you will see that there's some draft issues that council's talking about putting together a committee to review the charters, review the charter. I'm not going to read everything unless I'm required to. I'm a solicitor? No? I don't, okay, I get a no, so we'll move on. Appointments are on here again. The mayor and council are working on a number of appointments. We went from a slew on page 1 to a number on page 4. So we must have improved some in a way. And ordinances for final passage. Mr. Hanlon, bill number 8.
Bill 8 amends the 2018 general fund budget to provide for a supplemental appropriation of $25,000. This money was a result of a mitigation fee contribution from City Center towards the cost of a study to survey historic buildings along Hamilton Street from American Parkway to 12th Street, as required by the zoning hearing board for the demolition of a few buildings.
Okay, thank you. The administration. Mr. Robinson, this was yours?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. President. This was accepted by common consent, so unanimously from the committee to move forward. I do want to just quickly address something because it was brought up during courtesy of the floor concerning this, a recommendation that this money be used to fund the emergency warming shelter. And while I am equally upset about the fact that we have not distributed those funds, this money was specifically negotiated by the zoning hearing board and HARB as a mitigation factor because of the fact that buildings were being torn down. This is very similar to when PennDOT says, well, if you're going to build this, you have to provide some type of fee towards environmental remediation. It's not that we could then take that money and go use it to pay for 5 more cops. We are bound by the agreement to use this money exactly what it was stated for. So that's the concern with what was brought up earlier, is this is money that we are required to use specifically for this purpose. With that, I would request that my colleagues vote in the affirmative on this. This is not the total amount of money that's going to be needed for this study, but it is a very significant chunk. And we are looking to, Mr. Leitner's department is looking to get the RFP out as quickly as possible to see what the cost will be, and then also how much we can do with staff, because Mr. Kimmerly is qualified to do some of this work in-house along with what we'll need to hire a consultant for. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Robinson. Anybody else on council? Anybody from the public?
I do have to say that...
Please, ma'am, you got to come up to the...
I'm sorry.
You can't talk from your seat.
I'm sorry. Aaron Keller, 1934 West Lawn. I do have to say that I don't care where you get the money. You need to find the money to pay the warming shelter before you do anything else. It is costs that have been brought over from last year. It's a question of cleaning house and doing the right thing. And these people live under the worst circumstances, and the warming shelter closed early, okay? Does anybody else here not feel bad in your heart that you see apartments going for $800 to $2,000 and affordable housing being kicked to the side, or even people living in substandard housing at enormously high inflated rates? That something needs to be done. And I feel it's incumbent upon us with this new beginning, with all of the people who are here. I also feel like I have to take responsibility for what happened with the mayor and with what happened downtown, because I didn't ask questions about it. I just allowed myself to be dazzled by all of its promise. And it is very promising, but it's not the only thing that should be done to help Allentown.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public? Mr. Hanlon, you want to call vote on bill number 8?
Ms. Zappa?
Yes.
Mr. Greedy?
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks?
Yes.
Mr. McLean?
Yes.
Ms. Moda?
Yes.
Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Zucker?
Yes.
President, 7 yeas and no nays.
Thank you. Bill number 11, please.
Bill number 11 amends the 2018 capital fund budget by transferring from the residential streets project and a number of other projects to funding for the replacement of the fueling station and underground storage tanks at the municipal garage at Baltimore Street.
Okay. I would imagine that was Public Works, but I see Mr. Messinger sitting there. I would guess this is something that came up and we had to pull funds to.
Yeah, just to reiterate, this was planned back in 2015, but until we had the long-term lease with Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority, we weren't going to go forward with this. So it took a few years till we got this. It was a little bit more expensive than projected back in 2015. We have the funds to transfer for it, and it is a requirement of our lease.
Very good, thank you. Anybody else from council? Public. Mr. Hanlon, bill number 11, please.
Mr. Greedy.
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
Yes.
Ms. Moda.
Yes.
Mr. Robinson.
Yes.
Mr. Ducal.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa.
Yes.
President, 7 yeas and no nays.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Bill number 12, please.
Bill number 12 amends the 2018 general fund, the risk fund, the solid waste fund, and the stormwater fund by appropriating funds from the unappropriated balance for the rollover of encumbrances for the prior year commitments.
That was in my committee, Mr. President. We forward that favorably, unanimously, with an amendment that is adding, there's an amendment to it.
I would say that the amendment to it, I don't know if you want to do it by common consent, but it added a few other rollovers that were picked up recently by Budget and Finance, and then the new total rollover would be 521,505.97. Do that by common consent?
Yep.
Yes, okay, we can.
Okay, by common consent. The new total is 521,505.97.
Okay, anything else from council?
We're good on that one?
Public? No, seeing nobody.
Okay, on the rollover, Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. McLean,
Yes.
Ms. Moda,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa,
Yes.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
President, 7 yeas and no nays.
Thank you, Mr. Hanlon. Bill number 13, please.
Bill 13 provides for the vacation of South 10th Street from the center line of Devonshire Road to the vacated portion of Road Street.
And that was, came out of Public Works tonight also? And
Right.
forward favorable?
Yes, this is just basically, again, a paper street that was never opened. The people joining it, requesting it be vacated, and we have no objection to it.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from council? From the public? Seeing no one. Mr. Hanlon, vote on Bill 13, please.
Mr. McLean,
Yes.
Ms. Moda,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
Yes.
Mr. Zuko.
Yes.
Ms. Zappa,
Yes.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks.
Yes.
President, 7 yeas and no nays.
Thank you very much. Bill number 14, please.
Bill number 14 amends the 2018 general fund budget by transferring $521,712 from the unappropriated balance, $364,428 from various accounts within the general fund, and $75,000 from the solid waste fund to provide $961,140 for services provided by an outside vendor for the malware remediation.
And that was also in my committee, in our committee, Budget and Finance, and we moved it forward federally to full council. And there's an amendment that Ms. Mota has. And I don't know if we should read that amendment now, or if we should just move forward and change it. It was moved forward with the amendment. However, after the meeting, I spoke to Ms. Mota about the amendment that she had, and she's willing to compromise to just take that. I think it was $150,000 that was in the community economic development for civic and cultural activities and programs. And we talked about probably lowering that to from 150,000 to 75,000. That may be a compromise situation if council agrees.
Well, then I guess, yeah, I would say we're gonna make that an amendment to this bill, and then we can discuss it and.
Okay, you want me to formulate the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, the amendment would be to only delete reference to 75,000 under the civic expenses under the community and department director's office, and basically to leave 75,000 and to raid that by taking it from the unappropriated balance.
Okay, so instead of keeping the 150, we're gonna cut it that in half at 75, so there's 75 coming out of the unappropriated balance instead of 150. So it'd still be 75 left in the civic.
Mr. President, point of order.
Sure.
There were several questions that I had asked in the committee that I didn't get answers to that might result in my making an amendment to change some of this around, not to mention the public might also come up and speak to issues that could result in it. Would it be possible to not vote on the amendment immediately, simply to see if anything else needs to be added to it, and we save that for when public comment is complete? Is that possible?
I don't think so. I mean, I'd rather vote on the amendment. I'd rather vote on the amendment now, and if it fails, then you can bring whatever you want to. If it doesn't fail, then it stands. And, you know, then we go back to the bill, and you can talk about the bill.
Right, you made the amendment, and I thought, did you second it or not? I heard
Yes,
you
yes,
say
I
yes,
did.
but I didn't know it was a.
The reality is, I believe that community engagement is an essential, part of building community and personal relationship, and we need this in this community. So I will feel better if instead of 150, I mean, we allocated, and we've been fighting this for quite some time, For the past 2 years, we've been allocating money. It is important. So losing $150,000, I will feel a lot better if we can allocate 75 at least.
The only thing is, we are in the position of discussing the amendment, so you can talk about what you want. You can't make another amendment while there's an amendment.
Right.
So you can talk about what you want to do until we vote or not. You know what I mean? But you can't just make an amendment while there's an amendment that has been seconded.
Which was exactly my point about a point of order. I wasn't suggesting to make one, I was bringing up that is the case.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
Okay, we got the amendment on the floor. Mr. Robinson, you want to speak?
Sure.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sure. Without getting into too much of the other detail with this, but I'm going to ask my colleagues to vote this amendment down because, quite frankly, this is a program that we have not started yet. We are taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of existing programs, and this is some of the stuff I wanted to address in my questions. So it's a little hamstrung to discuss this amendment in that case, but my opinion is that if we're going to restore any funding in this, it should be for existing programs that deal with potential causes of a lot of overtime in certain departments, that deal with having enough money to deal if the city has to demolish properties or refurbish properties throughout the year, with training, with health and safety issues, with our public safety workers. If we're going to restore any of this funding, I don't think that it should be for a program that has never existed yet, as opposed to existing programs that absolutely are affecting, right now, employees, residents, and all of us. So I think that doing a community program is an excellent idea, but this is $1 million that we were not expecting to spend. What was discussed in the Finance Committee meeting is the fact that our unappropriated fund balance right now is $7.5 million. We vote on this bill, that drops to $7 million. We have $5 million of that is in a lockbox, which we would have to pay back before the end of 2018. So the reality is, the unappropriated balance that we don't have to pay back is now going to only be $2 million. As Mr. Hartzell said in the finance meeting, the GFO requirements are to have 3 months of operating expenses as a reserve. That's $18 million. We're now talking about either $7 million or $2 million, depending upon how you choose to look at the lockbox. That's a very dangerous situation. If something else occurs over the next several months, we're in a situation in which we don't have a lot of money to deal with an emergency because of that. Every dollar is going to count here. So I don't think that we should be restoring any of this funding and taking any money from the unappropriated balance. I understand the need for a program like this. I don't dispute it. But we also, I mean, Mr. Greedy, you and I are talking about trying to bring in an independent financial group to look at all of our finances and determine where we are. Because We had one candidate for mayor say that our deficit might be $8 million. We've had different numbers. There's people in the community, there's members of this body that think that there's going to be a tax increase sooner rather than later. Until we know exactly what our financial picture is, I also don't believe we should even be appropriating this money yet, because the last thing we should be doing is giving out grant money to a nonprofit that they start to rely on, and then next year, because we're in a really bad financial situation, oh, sorry, we can't do the grant again. So I just think my statement is that we should vote no on this amendment.
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Robinson. $50 million, the $75 million that I'm proposing as opposed to the $150 million. 150,000. Just wanted to see if you guys were aware.
It's all about the zeros.
That's right. Just wanted to make sure you're aware, okay? But anyway, instead of the $75,000, instead of the $150,000 to $75,000 can be used not necessarily always for new organizations or for new programs or for nonprofit organizations. I think it could be used to pay to help homeless, like she was talking about earlier. You know, we can use that part of that money to pay for the $22,000 Miss Erin Keller was talking about. 35,000? Yeah, that's 25. That's 25,000. It could be used for things for issues that we want to help. And it will be money that will be available to us to do that kind of thing, as opposed to having to go back into the budget and extract money from it. As you know, only the mayor can open the budget. And because of that, there have been issues that come up across, you know, for the homeless, for example. It's one that's always been dearing to me. And we can't do anything because the money's not there. So that $75,000 will give us the opportunity to do things like that. It's not a lot of money in a $105 million budget. So we're talking about $75,000 that can be used more. It can give us the opportunity to use for things that we want, that need to be done in the city, as opposed to having to, beg the administration at that time, at least, to open the budget to do something else. So that's my point on that.
Mr. Greedy, just to respond to that, first and foremost, everything that you, Ms. Moda, and everyone else has discussed so far before just a moment ago was that these would be grants. That's what was discussed last year during the budget. It's what's been discussed privately. It's what's been the city's recommendation for Mr. Leitner in January was for grants. So that's the lens with which I'm looking at this.
Okay, I got you.
So first and foremost. Secondly, there's nothing stopping us from the unappropriated balance or anything else with the administration's help from finding that money for the warming station, which I think that we should, by the way. There's nothing stopping us from doing that. This won't allow us to do it or not allow us to do it. My point is, we have $1 million emergency situation. We have a fund balance for emergencies that is grossly underfunded from what the best accounting practices will say. I'm simply saying that every dollar we have that can be used to deal with potential emergencies, we should be cognizant of that fact. That's my point of this, Mr.
One
Chairman.
more talking, Mr. Robinson.
Okay. Anybody else from council?
I understand, but I don't agree. I really believe that it is important for us to use this money, for things like this, like, events, maybe the warming shelter, things that we might need instead of going to the administration. And that was my understanding. I still think that $75,000 is not gonna hurt anybody. I mean, I understand that we have an emergency, but we can find other ways to offset the budget. That's my opinion.
Seeing nobody else on council, the public, open to the public. see anything.
No, I'm ready to vote.
All right, and I'm torn here now. If we could get a guarantee that 25 of the 75 would go towards the warming center, then I'd be in favor of it.
But, you asking me the question?
I'm throwing it out to all of us
Well,
sitting here.
I tell you what, I would be willing to, myself, advocate for some of that money, some of the $75,000 to go to that weapons station. I would advocate for that.
Yes.
Can I just, Mr. President, it's my understanding though, and Mr. Mayor and Mr. Russell, please correct me if I'm incorrect on this, but the statement that was in the paper is that this money is coming, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so what we would actually be looking at here would simply be a loan, which would mean that that 75,000, so that 25,000 would then go back into a potential grant program.
Well, you keep calling it grants program. I don't think it's grants program. I think.
Mr. Grady, that's everything that the administration gave us, that's everything we discussed.
That's regardless.
That is a grants program.
That has not been approved by city council.
I agree.
That has not been approved by city council. That's a proposal that was made. It's a draft proposal that was made by the Community Economic Development. It has to come to us, and we have to approve it. It has not been approved by city council.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just ask the administration, do we have a timetable on this money coming for the warming center?
3 weeks.
3 weeks?
Hopefully in 3 weeks.
Well,
I talked to Mr. Langer this afternoon, and we would hope it'll be 100 and release in about 3 weeks. 25,000.
Okay. Very good, thanks. The warming center bill will be taken care of, right? 3 weeks.
And Ms. Bennett, just a quick question. Mr. Hartzell, Ms. Fruit, this ordinance won't take effect for 10 days, correct? So if we're talking about 3 weeks, 10 days until the money's actually moved, it's a very, you're running out of time then, especially when you factor business days.
Well, correct, but I mean, so now I'm not worried about.
Right, that's what I was saying, though.
75, because it's coming. Right. All right, seeing nobody else? I guess we're ready for a vote, Mr. Hanlon.
Okay, this is on the amendment, and basically it would change that 150 deletion to 75, okay, and then it would take the 75 to fill in that 150 from the unappropriated balance. So we bump up to 175 from that unappropriated balance section. I think we call this the neighborhood impact fund. I think that's what we call it.
That's what it is, yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, and that's on the amendment, and it effective would be $75,000 intact for the neighborhood impact program. Ms. Mona,
Yes.
Mr. Robinson,
No.
Mr. Zupa,
Yes.
Ms. Zappa,
No.
Mr. Greedy,
Yes.
Mr. Hendricks,
Yes.
Mr. McLean.
No.
Mr. President, I have 4 yeas and 3 nays. It passes.
Thank you very much. All right, Bill 14, now we have resolutions for final package, R56.
Hold on. We have.
Oh, we gotta do the vote, we gotta do the vote on the bill itself, okay. No, let's vote on the amendment. All right. Council, anybody on the bill itself? The amendment's passed?
The questions that I asked in finance, I'm curious if we got answers to.
I was upstairs for 10 minutes between meetings and I forgot to bring my book back down. I apologize.
The one issue, there's 2 issues that I'm concerned with. One of them can be addressed, I would assume, by Mr. Messinger being here, which is the $50,000 or $52,000, I believe it is, from the temporary wages account that would equate to 3 part-time maintenance worker, 2 in streets. Mr. Messinger, I know you have a pretty aggressive schedule for street paving this summer. Is there a concern that this is going to result in more